The fluorescent light above Maya Chen's desk flickered with the rhythm of her typing, casting intermittent shadows across the crumpled drafts scattered like fallen leaves around her laptop. At 2:47 a.m., the university library had become a cathedral of silence, broken only by the distant hum of ventilation systems and the soft percussion of her fingers against worn keys. She paused, rubbing her eyes with the heel of her palm, the blue glow of her screen burning ghost images into her retinas, preparing and narrating. This type of story took us long efforts and hard work. So if you are enjoying the story, please consider subscribing to our channel. Her essay on digital privacy in the modern surveillance state stared back at her, cursor blinking impatiently at the end of an unfinished sentence. Maya had always been meticulous about her work, but this particular assignment for Professor Hartwell's political science seminar had consumed her for weeks. Something about the topic felt personal, urgent in a way she couldn't quite articulate. Perhaps it was the growing unease she'd felt lately, the sensation of being watched that made her glance over her shoulder in empty hallways. The library's old heating system groaned to life, sending a shiver through the building's bones. Maya pulled her oversized cardigan tighter around her shoulders, her grandmother's silver pendant catching the light as it swayed against her chest. The necklace had been her constant companion since childhood, a delicate lotus flower that her Nai had pressed into her palm during her final hospital visit, whispering in Mandarin about strength blooming from muddy waters. "Still here, Maya?" The voice made her jump, her heart hammering against her ribs. Jake Martinez emerged from between the towering stacks, his security guard uniform crisp despite the late hour. His weathered face carried the kind of gentle concern that reminded Maya of her father, though Jake was probably only in his 40s. "Sorry, Jake, lost track of time again." Maya's voice was hoarse from hours of silence. She'd always been a night owl, but lately, sleep had become elusive, filled with dreams she couldn't quite remember upon waking. Jake's radio crackled with static, a dispatcher's voice cutting through the quiet. "All units be advised, we have reports of suspicious activity near the north entrance." Maya noticed how Jake's hand instinctively moved to his radio, his posture straightening with practiced alertness. "You should head home soon," Jake said, but his eyes had shifted to the tall windows that lined the library's eastern wall. "Campus has been different lately. More security patrols, federal types asking questions." Maya followed his gaze too. The windows where the campus quad lay bathed in the orange glow of sodium lights. A figure in a dark coat stood beneath one of the old oak trees, perfectly still, facing the library. Even from this distance, Maya could feel the weight of their attention, like a physical presence pressing against her chest. "Federal types?" Maya asked, trying to keep her voice casual. "What kind of questions?" Jake hesitated, his fingers drumming against his belt. "Student records mostly. Academic performance, computer usage logs, that sort of thing. They mentioned something about digital footprints and persons of interest." He lowered his voice, glancing around the empty library. "Between you and me, they seemed particularly interested in students studying certain subjects. Political science, computer science, journalism." Maya's blood turned to ice water in her veins. Her essay suddenly felt heavy on her laptop screen, each word a potential red flag. She'd spent countless hours researching government surveillance programs, diving deep into leaked documents and classified reports that had been made public through various whistleblower cases. Her browser history was a labyrinth of searches about digital privacy, encryption methods, and government overreach. "Maya, you're one of the smartest students I've met in my 15 years here," Jake continued, his voice taking on a paternal tone. "But smart people sometimes ask questions that make others uncomfortable. You understand what I'm saying?" The figure beneath the oak tree hadn't moved, but something about their posture suggested patience, the kind of stillness that spoke of professional training. Maya's hands trembled slightly as she saved her document, her mind racing through the implications of Jake's warning. Her phone buzzed against the wooden desk, the vibration unnaturally loud in the quiet space. A text from an unknown number. Impressive work on surveillance state theory. We should talk. A friend. Maya's throat constricted as she read the words, her grandmother's pendant suddenly feeling heavy against her chest. I should go, Maya whispered, her voice barely audible. She began stuffing her papers into her worn messenger bag, the same bag that had carried her through 3 years of university life. Her movements were mechanical, driven by a growing sense of urgency that she couldn't quite explain. Jake placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. Maya, whatever you're working on, whatever you've found, be careful. There are people who don't want certain questions asked, certain truths uncovered. Promise me you'll be smart about this. Maya nodded, not trusting her voice to remain steady. As she packed away her laptop, she noticed that her essay had automatically saved a backup to her cloud storage, a small comfort in an increasingly uncertain world. The document represented months of research, hundreds of hours spent piecing together the puzzle of modern surveillance, and now it felt like evidence of something she wasn't supposed to know. The walk through the library's corridors felt endless, each footstep echoing off the walls like a countdown. Maya passed the circulation desk where Mrs. Patterson usually sat during day shifts, her reading glasses perpetually perched on the tip of her nose. The older woman had always been kind to Maya, often staying past closing to let dedicated students finish their work. Maya wondered what Mrs. Patterson would think if she knew that her favorite student might be caught up in something far beyond academic curiosity. The library's main entrance loomed ahead, its glass doors offering a view of the quad beyond. The figure beneath the oak tree was gone, but Maya's relief was short-lived. As she pushed through the doors into the cool night air, she noticed a black sedan parked along the curb where none had been before. Its windows were tinted and the engine was running, exhaust visible in the chilly air. Maya forced herself to walk normally, her sneakers silent against the concrete pathway that wound through the heart of campus. She passed the memorial garden, where she'd often eaten lunch between classes, the bronze plaque dedicated to alumni who had died in service to their country gleaming under the streetlights. The irony wasn't lost on her. She was potentially about to join a very different kind of service, one she hadn't volunteered for. Her dormitory, Whitman Hall, stood at the far edge of campus, a brick building that had housed students for over 60 years. Maya had always loved its ivy-covered walls and tall windows that let in floods of morning sunlight. Now as she approached the building, she noticed things that had never caught her attention before. The security cameras mounted at each corner, the card reader that logged every entry and exit. The way the building's design created natural choke points that would be difficult to escape from in an emergency. Maya's roommate, Sarah Kim, was fast asleep when she slipped into their shared room on the 3rd floor. Sarah was a pre-med student whose idea of late-night rebellion was staying up until midnight to watch Korean dramas. Her side of the room was meticulously organized, textbooks arranged by subject and color-coded notes pinned to a corkboard above her desk. Maya envied Sarah's certainty about her future, the clear path that stretched ahead of her from medical school to residency to a successful career as a Rayambun pediatrician. Maya's side of the room told a different story. Books on political theory were stacked beside investigative journalism texts, printouts of declassified government documents mixed with notes on constitutional law. Her wall displayed a world map marked with red pins indicating locations of major surveillance operations that had been exposed over the past decade. What had once felt like academic passion now seemed like a roadmap of her own destruction. She sat on her narrow bed, still clutching her phone with its mysterious message. The text had come from a number she didn't recognize, but something about the tone suggested the sender knew her well. Impressive work on surveillance state theory. How could they know about her essay? It hadn't been submitted yet, existed only on her personal laptop and in cloud storage that was supposed to be secure. Maya opened her laptop again, drawn back to her essay like a moth to flame. The document seemed different now, transformed from academic exercise to potential evidence of her own surveillance. She scrolled through the pages, reading passages that suddenly felt prophetic. The modern surveillance state operates not through dramatic raids or public arrests, but through the quiet cataloging of digital lives, the patient construction of profiles that predict behavior and assess threats. Had she written her own surveillance profile? Had every search, every source, every carefully crafted argument been building a case against her in some distant database? The questions multiplied in her mind like a virus, each answer leading to 3 more uncertainties. Her phone buzzed again. Another message from the unknown number. Room 347, Whitman Hall. We know you're awake. We know you're scared. We can explain everything. Maya's hands shook as she read the words, her room number stark and undeniable on the glowing screen. They weren't just watching her, they were here. Maya moved to her window, pressing her face against the cool glass. The quad below was empty except for the usual scatter of late-night students making their way back to dormitories. But she could feel eyes on her, invisible observers tracking her every movement. Her grandmother's pendant grew warm against her skin, as if responding to her elevated heart rate. The weight of decision pressed down on her shoulders like a physical force. She could ignore the messages, pretend that her research had been purely academic, hope that whatever attention she'd attracted would fade away. Or she could acknowledge that her life had already changed, that the questions she'd been asking had finally found someone willing to provide answers. Maya Chen, 21 years old, double major in political science and computer science, had always believed that knowledge was power. Now she was about to discover that some knowledge came with a price she'd never imagined paying. The fluorescent light above her desk flickered one final time before burning out completely, plunging half the room into shadow. In the darkness, Maya made her choice, her fingers already moving toward her laptop to begin deleting her digital footprints, preparing for a conversation that would reshape everything she thought she knew about her own life. The lotus pendant caught the moonlight streaming through her window, its silver surface reflecting fragments of light across the ceiling like scattered stars. Maya's grandmother had often said that the lotus bloomed most beautifully in the darkest waters, its roots deep in mud but its face turned always toward the sun. Maya was about to discover just how deep the mud could go, and whether she had the strength to bloom in the darkness that was rushing toward her, like a tide. Maya's alarm buzzed at 6:30 a.m., the same time it had every morning for the past 3 years. She'd managed only 2 hours of fitful sleep, her dreams filled with fragments of code, shadowy figures, and the persistent feeling of being hunted. The mysterious messages had stopped after midnight, but their impact lingered like the taste of copper in her mouth. Her morning routine had been sacred since freshman year, 20 minutes of yoga on the small mat wedged between her bed and desk, followed by green tea brewed in the electric kettle her mother had insisted she bring from home. Maya's movements were deliberate, meditative, a conscious effort to maintain normalcy in a world that had suddenly tilted off its axis. Each pose grounded her, connected her to the version of herself who had existed before last night's revelations. "You're up early, even for you," Sarah mumbled from beneath her covers, one eye visible above the edge of her comforter. "Everything okay? You were tossing and turning all night." Maya paused in her downward dog position, considering how much to share. Sarah was her closest friend at university, but their relationship had always been built on the comfortable distance of different academic worlds. Sarah's concerns were molecular biology and organic chemistry. Maya's had apparently escalated to matters of national security. "Just stress about the Hartwell essay," Maya said, which was technically true. "You know how I get when deadlines approach." Sarah sat up, her hair mussed with sleep, but her pre-med student's instincts already alert. Maya, you never stress about essays. You're the one who finishes assignments weeks early and then spends the extra time making them perfect. She studied. Maya's face with the same intensity she applied to microscopic slides. What's really going on? Maya moved into child's pose, her forehead touching the mat as she considered her words. Sarah deserved better than lies, but the truth felt too dangerous to share. How could she explain that her academic curiosity might have attracted the attention of people who turned students into assets? That the government she'd been studying was apparently studying her back? I think I might have gotten in over my head with this research, Maya said finally, her voice muffled by the yoga mat. Sometimes when you start pulling threads, you realize you're unraveling something much bigger than you expected. Sarah was quiet for a long moment, and Maya could hear the wheels turning in her methodical mind. Finally, her roommate spoke with the careful precision she reserved for lab reports. Maya, if you've stumbled onto something important, something that could help people understand how the world really works, isn't that worth pursuing? Even if it's scary? The question hung in the air between them, heavy with implications that Sarah couldn't fully understand. Maya lifted her head, meeting her roommate's concerned gaze. What if pursuing the truth puts the people you care about in danger? What if knowledge comes with a cost you're not sure you can pay? Then you have to decide what you're willing to sacrifice for the truth, Sarah said simply. And you have to trust the people who care about you to make their own choices about the risks they're willing to take. Maya's phone buzzed on her nightstand, interrupting their conversation. Another message from the unknown number. Coffee shop on 5th Street. 8 a.m. Come alone, but bring your laptop. It's time you learned the difference between surveillance and protection. Maya's hands trembled as she read the words, her heart rate spiking despite her morning meditation. Who's texting you this early? Sarah asked, noting Maya's reaction. Unknown. Number, probably spam, Maya lied, tucking the phone face down on her desk. The deception sat poorly in her stomach, adding to the growing weight of secrets she was carrying. Maya showered quickly, letting the hot water wash away the lingering fragments of restless sleep. In the mirror afterward, she studied her reflection. With new eyes. 21 years old, 5'4", with the kind of unremarkable features that would help her blend into crowds. Her dark hair fell straight to her shoulders, framing a face that her mother always said was too serious for someone so young. Maya had inherited her grandmother's eyes, dark, intelligent, and prone to seeing patterns where others saw only chaos. She dressed in her usual uniform, dark jeans, a comfortable sweater, and the worn leather boots that had carried her through countless campus adventures. The normalcy of her routine felt like armor, a way to maintain her identity in the face of forces trying to reshape it. Her messenger bag held the same items as always: laptop, notebooks, a collection of pens that she'd accumulated over years of academic life, and the small digital recorder she used for interviews when working on journalism projects. The coffee shop on 5th Street was a local institution called The Grind, a place where university students mixed with neighborhood residents, and the occasional professor conducting office hours over espresso. Maya had spent countless mornings there during her freshman year, when the novelty of independent adult life made every coffee shop visit feel like an adventure. Now as she walked the familiar route, every shadow seemed to hold potential threats. Morning air was crisp with the promise of autumn, leaves beginning their transformation from green to gold. Maya passed the same landmark she'd navigated for 3 years: the bookstore where she'd bought her first political science textbook, the pizza place that had sustained her through late-night study sessions, the park where she'd often sat to read when the library felt too confining. Each location held memories of the person she'd been before last night, before her academic curiosity had apparently marked her as a person of interest to people she'd only read about in classified documents. The Grind was busier than usual for an early weekday morning, filled with the usual mix of students, professionals, and retirees who treated the coffee shop as their living room. Maya recognized several faces from her classes, including David Wong from her political science seminar, who was hunched over his laptop in a corner booth. She wondered if David's research had attracted similar attention, if any of her classmates had received mysterious text messages offering explanations that would change everything. Maya ordered her usual medium, green tea with honey, and found a table near the window, where she could watch both the street and the interior of the coffee shop. Her laptop remained closed on the table, its weight seeming heavier than usual. The device contained 3 years of her intellectual life, essays, research projects, personal journals, and the extensive notes she'd compiled for her thesis on digital privacy rights. If someone wanted to understand who Maya Chen was, her laptop would provide a comprehensive portrait. At exactly 8 a.m., a woman approached her table. Mid-30s, average height, with the kind of professional appearance that suggested government work but not necessarily the dramatic black suits of Maya's imagination. Her hair was brown and simply styled, her clothing unremarkable, and her smile genuinely warm. Only her eyes gave her away. They were constantly moving, cataloging exits, and assessing threats with the practiced efficiency of someone trained in operational security. "Maya, I'm Agent Sarah Pierce. Thank you for coming." She extended her hand with the casual confidence of someone accustomed to having her authority accepted without question. "Agent Pierce," Maya repeated, her voice carefully neutral. "I assume you're the one who's been sending me text messages that suggest you know more about my life than I'm comfortable with." Pierce sat down across from Maya, her movements economical and precise. "I apologize for the dramatic approach, but your recent research activities have attracted attention from people who don't always prioritize subtle communication." She gestured to Maya's laptop. "May I?" Maya hesitated, her hands instinctively moving to protect the device. "That depends on what you want to see and why you think you have the right to see it." "I don't have the right," Pierce said, surprising Maya with her directness. "But I'm hoping you'll give me the privilege." "Your essay on surveillance state theory demonstrates a level of understanding that most people spend years developing. You've identified patterns and connections that suggest you have a natural gift for intelligence analysis." "Intelligence analysis," Maya repeated, the words feeling strange in her mouth. "Are you saying the government has been monitoring my homework?" Pierce's expression grew more serious. "Maya, your homework involved accessing and cross-referencing classified documents that have been made public through various channels. You've created a comprehensive analysis of domestic surveillance programs that reads like an intelligence briefing. That kind of work doesn't go unnoticed." Maya opened her laptop, her fingers moving automatically to the password screen. The familiar ritual of unlocking her digital life felt different under Pierce's watchful gaze, like performing intimate activities in front of a stranger. Her desktop wallpaper, a photo of the lotus garden where her grandmother had taught her to meditate, seemed to mock her with its peaceful imagery. "This is my essay," Maya said, opening the document that had consumed so many late nights. "It's academic research based on publicly available sources." Pierce leaned forward, her eyes scanning Maya's work with obvious appreciation. "Maya, this analysis identifies operational patterns that our own analysts took months to recognize. You've mapped connections between seemingly unrelated surveillance programs and predicted their convergence points with remarkable accuracy." She looked up from the screen. "Where did you learn to think like this?" The question caught Maya off guard. "I don't know. I've always been good at seeing patterns, at understanding how systems work. My grandmother used to say I had a gift for seeing the water that fish don't know they're swimming in." "Your grandmother was wise," Pierce said softly. "And she was right. You have a rare ability to step outside systems and see them clearly, to understand their true purpose rather than their stated goals." That's a valuable skill, Maya. It's also a dangerous one. Maya felt a chill that had nothing to do with the morning air. Dangerous how? Pierce glanced around the coffee shop, her trained eyes noting the positions of other patrons, the locations of exits, the sight lines from the street. Because there are people who prefer that these systems remain invisible, who benefit from the public not understanding how thoroughly their digital lives are monitored and analyzed. Your work threatens that invisibility. So you're here to what? Arrest me? Confiscate my research? Disappear me to some black site I wrote about in my essay? Maya's voice was rising, drawing glances from nearby tables. She forced herself to speak more quietly. Is this how academic freedom dies? With polite conversations in coffee shops. Maya, I'm here to offer you a choice, Pierce said, her tone remaining calm despite Maya's agitation. You can continue your academic work, publish your essay, and hope that the attention it attracts remains benign. Or you can use your abilities in service of something larger than yourself. Help us understand threats that most people never see coming. Maya stared at her laptop screen, at the hundreds of hours of work that had apparently transformed her from student to asset. You want me to become a spy. I want you to become someone who can see patterns that others miss. Someone who can help protect the country by understanding how information moves in the digital age. Your research has already proven you're capable of this work. The question is whether you're willing to do it. Maya closed her laptop, the click echoing like a gunshot in the sudden silence between them. And if I say no? Pierce's expression remained neutral, but Maya caught a flicker of something in her eyes, regret, perhaps, or genuine concern. Then you continue your life as a student, graduate with your degrees, and pursue whatever career path you've planned. But Maya, knowledge like yours doesn't stay secret forever. There are other organizations, other governments, that would be very interested in someone with your analytical abilities. The implication hung in the air like smoke from an extinguished fire. Maya thought about her grandmother's pendant, warm against her chest, and the old woman's stories about surviving periods of history when individual lives were swept away by forces too large to comprehend. Nai had often said that sometimes the choice wasn't between good and evil, but between different kinds of sacrifice. How long do I have to decide? Maya asked. Take your time, Pierce said, standing from the table with fluid grace. But remember, Maya, the world doesn't stop moving while we make our decisions. The patterns you've identified are real, and they're accelerating. Whether you choose to help us understand them or not, they're going to reshape how privacy and freedom exist in the digital age. Pierce placed a simple business card on the table. It contained only a phone number and the words, "When you're ready." Then she was gone, moving through the coffee shop crowd with the practiced invisibility of someone trained to disappear. Maya sat alone with her thoughts, her untouched tea growing cold beside her silent laptop. Around her, life continued its normal rhythm: students discussing assignments, professionals conducting business calls, retirees debating politics with the passion of people who had lived through multiple iterations of national crisis. None of them knew that a 21-year-old political science major had just been offered a chance to step behind the curtain of history, to see the mechanisms that shaped their daily lives. Her phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. Hope your mysterious early meeting went well. See you tonight for study group. Maya stared at the message, realizing that her roommate's casual inquiry represented a world she might be leaving behind. Relationships that might not survive the weight of secrets she was being asked to carry. Maya. Chen had spent her entire academic career studying the tension between security and freedom, between the individual's right to privacy and the state's need for information. Now she was being asked to become part of that tension, to live inside the contradiction she'd spent so many hours analyzing. The lotus pendant grew warm against her skin, reminding her of her grandmother's wisdom about finding strength in muddy waters. As she packed her laptop and prepared to return to campus, Maya realized that regardless of her decision, her old life was already ending. The girl who had entered the grind that morning, the student whose biggest concern was finishing an essay, no longer existed. In her place stood someone who had been offered a glimpse behind the veil, someone who now understood that her analytical gifts were not just academic talents, but potential weapons in conflicts she was only beginning to understand. The walk back to campus felt different, charged with new awareness of the invisible systems that monitored her every step. Maya found herself noticing security cameras, wondering which ones were standard campus safety measures and which might be something more sophisticated. Her phone, once a simple tool for communication, now felt like a tracking device, its constant connection to cellular networks creating a digital breadcrumb trail that could be followed by anyone with the right access. Maya's grandmother had taught her that wisdom came not from avoiding difficult choices, but from understanding their true cost before making them. As Maya approached Whitman Hall, her dormitory suddenly feeling like a sanctuary she might soon lose, she began to calculate the price of knowledge, the weight of secrets, and the cost of becoming someone the world needed, but she wasn't sure she wanted to be. The study group that evening felt like performing in a play, where Maya was the only one who knew the script had changed. Sarah, David Wong, and 3 other students from Professor Hartwell's seminar had gathered in the common room of Whitman Hall, their laptops and textbooks spread across the worn coffee table like the artifacts of a simpler time. Maya watched her classmates debate surveillance policy with the passionate idealism of people who believed their opinions mattered in some abstract, academic way. The Fourth Amendment clearly protects against unreasonable searches, argued Jessica Martinez, a junior with dreams of law school and a faith in constitutional protections that Maya now found both touching and naive. The government can't just collect data on citizens without cause. David laughed, the sound carrying a cynicism that seemed more pronounced than usual. Jessica, that's adorable. The Fourth Amendment protects against physical searches of physical spaces. Digital data exists in a legal gray area that the courts are decades behind understanding. He gestured to his laptop screen, where he'd pulled up an article about data collection. Every text you send, every website you visit, every location your phone records, it's all fair game under the third-party doctrine. Maya found herself studying David with new eyes, wondering if his sophisticated understanding of surveillance law came from the same kind of late-night research that had attracted Agent Pierce's attention. His analysis was sophisticated, nuanced, in ways that suggested he'd moved beyond textbook learning into primary source investigation. But there are oversight mechanisms, Sarah interjected, her pre-med precision extending to her occasional forays into political discussion. Congressional committees, judicial review, internal auditing systems. The system has checks and balances. Maya's phone buzzed against her thigh, another message from Agent Pierce's number. Notice how your study group is discussing theoretical surveillance while sitting in a room with 7 active monitoring devices. Education is sometimes about learning what not to say out loud. Maya's blood turned cold as she realized Pierce was somehow listening to their conversation, perhaps through the very devices they were using to research surveillance. Maya, you've been quiet tonight, Jessica observed. Your essay is probably more comprehensive than all of ours combined. What's your take on digital privacy rights? Maya looked around the circle of faces, friends and classmates who trusted her, who had no idea that their casual academic discussion was being monitored by people who could reshape their lives without warning. The weight of her new knowledge pressed against her chest like a physical force, making it difficult to breathe naturally. I think we're asking the wrong questions, Maya said finally, her voice careful and measured. We're debating what the law says about surveillance, but we should be asking what's actually happening, regardless of legal frameworks. The gap between official policy and operational reality might be larger than we imagine. David leaned forward, his interest obviously piqued. What do you mean, operational reality? Maya felt as if she were standing at the edge of a cliff, each word potentially pushing her over the precipice into a world where academic discussion became evidence of sedition. I mean that complex systems often develop their own logic, their own momentum, independent of their original purpose. Surveillance programs designed to protect national security might evolve into tools for political control, economic advantage, or social engineering. The question isn't what they're supposed to do, it's what they're actually capable of doing. Her phone buzzed again. Careful. Maya, you're describing classified operational methodologies to a group that includes at least 2 people who report their conversations to interested parties. Academic freedom has limits. Maya's hands trembled as she read the message, realizing that her attempt to share knowledge responsibly was potentially putting her friends in danger. That's a fascinating point, David said, but something in his tone had shifted, become more guarded. Of course, without access to classified information, we can only speculate about the gap between policy and practice. Maya caught the subtle emphasis on classified information and felt her stomach drop. Was David warning her, or was he exactly the kind of person Agent Pierce had cautioned her about? She found herself analyzing her classmates' words and expressions with the paranoid intensity of someone who had learned that trust was a luxury she could no longer afford. The study group continued for another hour, but the conversation had lost its spontaneous energy. Maya noticed how often the discussion returned to questions of access, who had the right to classified information, how whistleblowers should be treated, whether national security justified extensive domestic surveillance. Each topic felt like a test, a way of gauging her responses and measuring her knowledge against some invisible standard. After the other students left, Sarah lingered in the common room, organizing her notes with characteristic precision. Maya, can we talk for a minute? Maya nodded, though every instinct told her to avoid conversations that might reveal more than she could safely share. Sarah was her closest friend at university, but friendship had become a potential liability in a world where trust could be weaponized. Something's been different about you since this morning, Sarah said, settling into the worn armchair across from Maya. I know you said it was stress about the essay, but this feels bigger. You're analyzing everything we say, like you're looking for hidden meanings. Maya considered lying, constructing some plausible explanation for her changed behavior that would satisfy Sarah's concerns without revealing dangerous truths. But her roommate's genuine worry, the care in her voice, made deception feel like a betrayal of their friendship. Sarah, what would you do if you learned something that changed how you saw the world? Something that made you realize that things you thought were theoretical were actually immediate and personal. Sarah was quiet for a long moment, her scientific mind working through the implications of Maya's carefully phrased question. I guess it would depend on whether the knowledge came with responsibility. In medicine, we learn things about patients that we're obligated to keep confidential, even when sharing that information might help other people. Sometimes knowledge is a burden you have to carry alone. Maya felt tears gathering in her eyes, though she couldn't quite explain why Sarah's understanding hit her so powerfully. What if the knowledge suggested that people you cared about might be in danger? That your academic work had unintended consequences? Then I'd want to know more before making any decisions, Sarah said simply. And I'd want to trust the people I cared about to help me figure out the right thing to do, even if I couldn't share all the details. Maya's phone buzzed again, but this time the message came from a different number. Maya Chen, we represent certain interests that are concerned about your recent activities. Your conversation with Agent Pierce has been noted. There are alternatives to government service that might better serve your long-term interests. Coffee tomorrow, same place, 10 a.m. Friends who appreciate your talents. Maya stared at the message, her hands shaking as she realized that her morning conversation had attracted additional attention from people who were definitely not government agents. "Maya, you're scaring me," Sarah said, noting Maya's reaction to her phone. "Whatever's happening, whatever you've gotten involved in, you don't have to handle it alone." Maya looked at her roommate, brilliant, ethical, destined for a career saving lives, and realized that Sarah's offer of support might be the most dangerous thing either of them could accept. "Sarah, I need you to promise me something. If anything happens to me, if I disappear, or if people start asking questions about me, I need you to contact my parents immediately. Don't wait, don't try to investigate on your own, just call them." Sarah's face went pale. "Maya, what are you talking about? What could happen to you?" Maya stood up, her legs unsteady with the adrenaline that had been coursing through her system since morning. "I'm talking about the possibility that my research attracted the wrong kind of attention from people who don't believe in academic freedom. I'm talking about the chance that asking the right questions might come with consequences I never anticipated." She hugged Sarah tightly, trying to memorize the feeling of uncomplicated friendship, of relationships based on shared experiences, rather than calculated risks. "I love you like a sister, Sarah. Remember that, no matter what happens next." Maya retreated to her room, locking the door behind her with hands that couldn't quite stop shaking. Her laptop sat on her desk like an accusation, its closed lid hiding the research that had transformed her from student to asset to potential target. She opened the device and began systematically backing up her files to encrypted drives, preparing for the possibility that her digital life might be confiscated without warning. Her essay stared back at her from the screen. Months of work that had become the catalyst for a personal crisis she couldn't have imagined. Maya began to read her own analysis with new eyes, seeing not academic theory, but operational intelligence that apparently had value to multiple organizations with conflicting interests. Each paragraph felt like evidence in a case being built around her, proof that she possessed knowledge and analytical abilities that made her simultaneously valuable and dangerous. Maya's phone rang, an actual voice call rather than another cryptic text message. The caller ID showed her mother's number, and Maya felt a wave of relief at the prospect of hearing a familiar voice from her old life. "Xiao Bao," her mother's voice carried the warmth of home across the digital connection. "How are your studies? Your father and I were talking about you this evening." Maya closed her eyes, letting her mother's Mandarin endearment wash over her like a blessing. Xiao Bao, little treasure, a nickname that connected her to childhood afternoons in her grandmother's garden, to a time when the most complicated decision she faced was choosing between mathematics and literature homework. "Mama, I'm okay. Busy with schoolwork, you know how it is." Maya tried to keep her voice steady, but mothers possessed a supernatural ability to detect emotional disturbance in their children's voices. "Maya, something is wrong. I can hear it in your voice. Are you eating enough? Getting enough sleep? Your grandmother always said that worry showed first in the voice, then in the spirit." Maya touched her pendant, feeling the silver warm under her fingers. "I miss Nai Nai. I've been thinking about her stories lately, about the times when individual choices had consequences she couldn't predict. Your grandmother lived through many changes, Xiao Bao. She used to say that wisdom came not from avoiding difficult times, but from understanding that every generation faces tests that seem impossible until they're overcome." Her mother paused, and Maya could almost see her settling into her favorite chair, the one by the window that overlooked the small garden where Maya had learned to tend lotus flowers. "What kind of test are you facing, my daughter?" Maya felt tears threatening again, but she forced her voice to remain steady. "What if someone offered you a chance to use your abilities to help people, but accepting meant leaving behind the life you'd planned? What if the choice was between safety and purpose?" "Ah," her mother said, and Maya could hear the understanding in that single syllable. You're talking about the kind of choice your grandmother faced when she was young, during the war. She could have stayed safe, kept her head down, focused only on survival. Instead, she chose to use her gifts to help others, even when it put her in danger. But Nine-Eye's choices were clear good versus evil, resistance versus collaboration. What if the choice is between different kinds of service, different ways of protecting people? Her mother was quiet for a long moment, and Maya could almost hear her thinking across the miles that separated them. Maya, your grandmother used to say that the lotus grows most beautifully when its roots are deepest in the mud. Sometimes we have to go through darkness to reach the light, but we never have to go through it alone. Mama, if people start asking questions about me, if anyone contacts you or Baba about my activities, I need you to be very careful about what you say. And I need you to know that whatever happens, whatever choices I make, I love you both more than I can express. Maya Chen, her mother said, her voice taking on the stern tone she'd used when Maya was a child who'd been caught in some minor transgression. You listen to me carefully. You are our daughter, our treasure, and there is nothing you could do or become that would change our love for you. If you're facing difficult choices, then face them with the knowledge that you have a family who will support you no matter what. After hanging up, Maya sat in her small dormitory room, surrounded by the artifacts of her university life, but feeling profoundly disconnected from the person who had accumulated them. Her textbooks, her carefully organized notes, her collection of political theory volumes, all of it belonged to someone who had believed that knowledge was purely academic, that understanding systems meant studying them from a safe distance. Maya opened her laptop again and began typing. Not her essay this time, but a letter she hoped she'd never need to send. Sarah, if you're reading this, it means I've made a choice that took me away from the life we shared. I want you to know that our friendship was one of the purest things. In my world, a connection based on genuine affection rather than calculated advantage. You represent the best of what I'm leaving behind, the belief that kindness and intellect can coexist, that it's possible to care about justice without becoming consumed by it. I need you to understand that my research was never just academic. The patterns I identified, the connections I made, they were real, and they attracted attention from people who exist in spaces between official acknowledgement and public denial. I was offered choices that seemed impossible until I realized that not choosing was itself a choice, one that might put other people in danger. Take care of yourself, Sarah. Become the doctor you've always dreamed of being. Help people in ways that are clear and immediate and healing. Leave the shadows to those of us who can't resist the darkness. Maya saved the letter to an encrypted folder, along with copies of her research and detailed instructions for accessing her various backup systems. If something happened to her, if she disappeared into the world Agent Pierce represented, she wanted there to be a record of who she'd been before her life became classified. Her phone buzzed with yet another message, this one from a third unknown number. Maya, your value as an asset has been noted by multiple interested parties. Tomorrow's meeting will determine whether you become a willing participant in your own future or someone who requires more direct persuasion. Choose wisely. Observers. Maya stared at the message, realizing that her situation had evolved beyond a simple choice between government service and academic life. She was now at the center of some kind of competition between organizations that viewed her analytical abilities as strategic resources to be acquired. One way or another, she stood at her window, looking out over the campus that had been her home for 3 years. Students were walking along the pathways between dormitories, heading to late-night study sessions or social gatherings, living the kind of uncomplicated young adult life that Maya was apparently leaving behind. Tomorrow she would meet with people whose intentions remained mysterious, and afterward, nothing would ever be the same. Maya touched her grandmother's pendant one final time, drawing strength from the old woman's memory. Nai had often said that courage wasn't the absence of fear, but the decision to act in service of something larger than yourself, despite the fear. Maya was about to discover just how much courage she possessed, and whether her grandmother's wisdom would be enough to guide her through the darkness that was rushing toward her like a tide. The fluorescent light in her room flickered and died, plunging the space into the blue glow of her laptop screen. In that eerie illumination, Maya Chen prepared to step across the threshold from student to something else entirely, from someone who studied power to someone who might have to wield it. Maya didn't sleep. She spent the night sitting by her window, watching the campus security guards make their rounds, noting patterns she'd never paid attention to before. At 3:47 a.m., she spotted a figure standing beneath the same oak tree where she'd noticed someone the previous night. This time, however, the person wasn't alone. Two additional figures flanked them, positioned with military precision that spoke of professional surveillance. By 5 a.m., Maya had made her decision. She dressed carefully, choosing clothing that would allow her to move quickly if necessary. Running shoes, dark jeans, a jacket with multiple pockets. She left a final message for Sarah, propped against her roommate's pillow. Gone to class early. Don't worry if I'm not back tonight. Trust that I'm doing what I believe is right. The campus felt different in the pre-dawn darkness, transformed from familiar academic environment into something that resembled a staging area. Maya counted at least 7 people who seemed to be conducting surveillance, positioned at strategic points along her route to 5th Street. Some carried coffee cups or newspapers, maintaining the pretense of normal morning activities, but their positioning was too precise to be coincidental. The grind was already busy when Maya arrived at 9:30 am, 30 minutes before her scheduled meeting. She wanted time to observe, to identify the players before committing to any particular course of action. Agent Pierce sat at the same table they'd occupied the previous morning, but now Maya noticed things she'd missed before: the subtle earpiece, the way Pierce's eyes constantly monitored the room's occupants, the careful positioning that kept her back to the wall with clear sightlines to all entrances. At a table near the back corner sat a man in his 50s, unremarkable except for the intensity with which he wasn't looking at Maya. His newspaper was held at precisely the right angle to observe the room while appearing to read, and Maya noticed that he hadn't turned a page in the 10 minutes she'd been watching him. A young woman with short auburn hair occupied a booth near the window, typing on her laptop with the focused attention of someone conducting surveillance rather than checking email. Her clothing was expensive, but deliberately casual, and Maya caught a glimpse of what looked like a small recording device when the woman reached for her coffee cup. Maya ordered her usual green tea and found a table equidistant from all 3 potential contacts, positioning herself where she could observe their reactions to her choices. At exactly 10 a.m., her phone buzzed with 3 simultaneous messages. Pierce's number, ready when you are. The unknown number from the previous day, northeast corner table. Let's discuss your future. A new number. Maya, it's time you learned about the game you've stumbled into. Back booth, by the window. Maya looked around the coffee shop, realizing that she was at the center of some kind of convergence that had been orchestrated without her knowledge. 3 different organizations had arranged to meet her at the same time and place, suggesting either remarkable coincidence or careful coordination. She stood up, her tea untouched, and walked to the center of the room where she could address all 3 parties simultaneously. I think it's time we dispense with the pretense, Maya said, her voice carrying clearly in the morning bustle of the coffee shop. Agent Pierce, gentleman with the newspaper, and lady with the laptop, you're all here because of me. And I'm tired of being treated like a chess piece that doesn't understand the game being played. The reaction was immediate and telling. Pierce's hand moved instinctively toward her jacket. The man folded his newspaper with military precision, and the auburn-haired woman closed her laptop while keeping her eyes fixed on Maya. The other coffee Shop patrons continued their conversations, unaware that they were witnessing the convergence of intelligence operatives around a 21-year-old political science student. Pierce stood up first, her movement fluid but cautious. "Maya, you're absolutely right. This situation has become unnecessarily complex, and you deserve to understand what's happening." The man with the newspaper approached from Maya's left, his movements economical and precise. "Ms. Chen, I represent certain private sector interests that have been monitoring your academic work. We believe your talents might be better utilized outside traditional government channels." The auburn-haired woman joined them, her laptop tucked under her arm like a shield. "Maya, I'm Dr. Elena Vasquez from the Digital Rights Foundation. We've been tracking government recruitment of students with your analytical profile, and we're here to offer you alternatives." Maya found herself at the center of a triangle formed by three people who represented very different visions of her future. "So Agent Pierce wants me to join the government, Mr. Newspaper wants me to work for private intelligence, and Dr. Vasquez wants me to, become a digital rights activist. We want you to understand the full scope of your options," Dr. Vasquez said, her voice carrying the passionate intensity of someone who had devoted her life to protecting individual privacy rights. "The government will use your abilities to enhance surveillance capabilities. Private intelligence firms will sell your insights to the highest bidder, regardless of ethical implications. We offer you the chance to use your gifts to protect people from exactly the kind of systems you've been studying." Pierce stepped closer, her expression serious but not threatening. "Maya, Dr. Vasquez isn't wrong about the ethical complexities, but she's not seeing the bigger picture. There are genuine threats that require sophisticated intelligence analysis to prevent. Your abilities could save lives, protect national security, prevent attacks that would devastate innocent people." The man who had been reading the newspaper smiled with the practiced charm of someone accustomed to negotiating high-stakes deals. "Ms. Chen, both of these perspectives assume that you want to serve causes larger than yourself. What if I told you that your analytical abilities could make you independently wealthy, that private consulting could provide you with resources and autonomy that government service never could?" Maya looked around the coffee shop, noting that several new customers had entered during the past few minutes. Their positioning suggested they were security backup for the three primary contacts, insurance against the conversation taking an unexpected turn. She was surrounded by people who viewed her as an asset to be acquired, protected, or potentially neutralized. "I have some questions," Maya said, her voice steadier than she felt. "First, Agent Pierce, if I join your organization, what happens to my academic work? Can I continue my research, publish my findings, maintain some connection to the intellectual freedom that brought me to your attention?" Pierce hesitated, and that pause told Maya everything she needed to know. "Your research would become classified. Maya, you have access to information that would make your current analysis seem elementary, but you wouldn't be able to share your insights publicly. National security requires certain sacrifices of personal autonomy." Maya turned to the private sector representative. "And if I work for you, who decides which clients receive my analysis? What if my insights are used to target journalists, activists, or political dissidents?" The man's smile never wavered, but his eyes grew colder. "Ms. Chen, private enterprise allows market forces to determine the most efficient allocation of resources. Your concerns about specific applications suggest a naivety about how intelligence actually functions in the global economy." Finally, Maya addressed Dr. Vasquez. "If I join your organization, how long before the government or private sector decides I'm too dangerous to operate freely? What protection can you offer against people who have resources I can't even imagine?" Dr. Vasquez's expression grew grim. "Honestly, very little. We can provide legal support, media attention, public advocacy. But if powerful interests decide you pose a significant threat, Our ability to protect you is limited. We offer the chance to fight for something meaningful, not the guarantee of safety. Maya felt her phone buzz and glanced down to see a message. From Sarah. Maya, there are men in suits asking questions about you in the dormitory office. Whatever's happening, it's happening now. Maya's blood turned cold as she realized that her time for careful deliberation had just expired. It seems my choice has become more urgent, Maya said, showing the message to all 3 contacts. People are investigating me on campus, which suggests that someone has decided to accelerate this process. Pierce's expression darkened as she read Sarah's text. Maya, those aren't our people. If government agents were conducting interviews, they'd coordinate with me. Someone else has decided to force your hand. Dr. Vasquez pulled out her own phone, her fingers moving quickly across the screen. I'm getting reports of similar activities at universities across the country. Students with profiles similar to yours are being approached by unidentified federal agents. This looks like some kind of coordinated recruitment or assessment operation. The private sector representatives. Facade of casual confidence finally cracked. Ms. Chen, this changes the tactical situation considerably. If you're being investigated by unidentified parties, your value as an asset has increased dramatically, but so has your vulnerability. Maya's phone rang, displaying a number she recognized as her parents' home. She answered immediately, her heart pounding with dread. Maya? Her father's voice carried an edge of fear she'd never heard before. There are people here asking questions about you, about your studies, your computer usage, your political activities. They say they're from Homeland Security, but they won't show us proper identification. Baba, listen to me carefully, Maya said, her voice taking on a strength she didn't know she possessed. Don't answer any questions without a lawyer present. Contact Uncle Robert immediately. He'll know how to handle this. And Baba? Tell Mama that I love you both, and that whatever happens next, I'm doing what Nainai would have done. Maya hung up and faced the 3 people who were competing for the right to determine her future. My parents are being questioned by people who may or may not be legitimate federal agents. My roommate is reporting suspicious activity on campus. It seems that whatever organization you 3 represent, there's a 4th player who's decided to escalate this situation. Pierce was already typing on her phone, her expression grim with professional concern. Maya, I'm calling in protective resources for your family. But you need to understand, if unauthorized parties are conducting investigations, your safety is no longer guaranteed regardless of which option you choose. Dr. Vasquez stepped closer, her voice urgent with conviction. Maya, this is exactly why our work matters. Someone is conducting extra-legal surveillance and harassment of American citizens based on their academic research. You can help us document and expose these abuses, but only if you remain free to operate. The private sector representative had already moved toward the coffee shop's exit, his casual demeanor replaced by the focused alertness of someone preparing for potential violence. Miss Chen, my offer stands, but I suggest you make your decision quickly. The window for controlled choice-making appears to be closing. Maya looked around the coffee shop one final time, noting the positioning of what were almost certainly additional operatives, the subtle but unmistakable signs that the normal world of academic life was being replaced by something far more dangerous. Her grandmother's pendant felt warm against her chest, and she could almost hear Nainai's voice reminding her that courage meant acting despite fear, not in its absence. Agent Pierce, Maya said, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had just accepted the weight of adult decision-making. I'll work with your organization, but only if you can guarantee my family's safety and my ability to maintain some connection to the academic world that shaped me. I won't disappear into black budget programs and lose myself completely. Pierce nodded, relief evident in her expression. Maya, I can't promise that this path will be easy, but I can promise that your abilities will be used to protect innocent people, and that your family will have our protection." Dr. Vasquez looked disappointed but not surprised. "Maya, I respect your choice, but remember, the door remains open if you ever decide that government service isn't compatible with your values. The digital rights community will always have a place for someone with your insights." The private sector representative paused at the door, turning back with a smile that carried no warmth. "Ms. Chen, private enterprise is patient. When you discover the limitations of government bureaucracy, when you realize how much your abilities are worth on the open market, we'll be waiting." Maya watched him leave, then turned to Pierce. "What happens now?" "Now we get you somewhere safe while we figure out who's been conducting unauthorized surveillance. Your academic life is over, Maya, but your real education is just beginning." Pierce's expression was both sympathetic and determined. "Welcome to the intelligence community, Asset Priority 1. Your country needs what you can see that others miss." Maya touched her pendant one final time, drawing strength from her grandmother's memory, then followed Agent Pierce toward the coffee shop's exit and the uncertain future that awaited beyond its familiar walls. Behind them, Dr. Vasquez watched them go, her expression combining admiration with deep concern for what Maya was about to become. 3 months later, Maya sat in a windowless conference room deep beneath a nondescript office building in McLean, Virginia, analyzing satellite imagery on 3 separate monitors, while her fingers moved across a keyboard with the fluid precision of someone who had learned to think at the speed of digital networks. The transformation from college student to intelligence analyst had been more dramatic than she could have imagined, but also more intellectually satisfying than any academic work she'd ever undertaken. "Asset Priority 1, came the voice of Director James Morrison through the conference room's intercom system. "We need your assessment of the Beijing data centers. The patterns you identified last week are accelerating." Maya's official designation had become a kind of informal name among her colleagues, though she'd learned that very few people knew her actual identity. The intelligence community operated on strict compartmentalization. She worked with analysts, technicians, and operators who knew her only as someone with extraordinary pattern recognition abilities. Her personal life had been carefully constructed to provide cover for her real work. Officially, she'd transferred to a graduate program at Georgetown, though the classes she attended were specialized training sessions in digital intelligence, analysis, geopolitical assessment, and operational security. The Beijing centers are coordinating with installations in Sao Paulo and Mumbai, Maya reported, her voice carrying the confident authority she'd developed over months of briefing. "Senior officials. The data flow patterns suggest they're building redundancy for something that requires global distribution, but centralized control. Based on the encryption signatures, I'd estimate they're preparing to launch a comprehensive social monitoring system that could track individual behavior across international boundaries." Director Morrison's approval was evident in his tone. "Outstanding analysis, Priority 1. Your assessment aligns with human intelligence we've received from other sources. Can you predict deployment timeline?" Maya studied the data streams flowing across her monitors, her mind processing information at a level that still surprised her. The government had provided cognitive enhancement training, techniques for expanding working memory and accelerating pattern recognition that had transformed her analytical capabilities. "Based on current infrastructure development rates and the coordination patterns I'm seeing, I'd estimate 18 to 24 months for full deployment." "But Director, there's something else." "Go ahead." "The system architecture includes capability for backdoor access. Whoever designed this isn't just planning to monitor foreign populations, they're building infrastructure that could be turned on any connected society, including our own. The same data streams that would track dissidents in authoritarian regimes could monitor American citizens if the access protocols were compromised." Morrison was quiet for a long moment, and Maya could almost hear him calculating the implications of her analysis. Priority 1. I want you to prepare a comprehensive briefing for the National Security Council. Full technical analysis, threat assessment, and policy recommendations. This could reshape how we approach digital sovereignty. Maya nodded though. Morrison couldn't see her in the windowless room. Over the past 3 months, her work had contributed to policy decisions she'd only read about in textbooks, influenced operations that remained classified above her clearance level, and helped prevent threats that the public would never know had existed. The intellectual satisfaction was intoxicating, but it came with a personal cost that she was still learning to manage. Her phone, a secure device that looked identical to a normal smartphone, but was actually a sophisticated communication terminal, buzzed with a message from Sarah. Maya, I miss our late-night conversations. Your mom called to check on you again. She says you sound different when you talk to her now, more guarded. Are you okay in your new program? Maya stared at the message, feeling the familiar weight of necessary deception. Her cover story explained her absence from campus as a transfer to an accelerated graduate program, but maintaining relationships from her old life required constant careful management. Every conversation with friends and family was monitored, analyzed for potential security breaches, and archived in systems she'd helped design. She typed back carefully, I'm good. Sarah, the new program is intense and requires a lot of focus. Different from undergrad, more specialized and demanding. I think about our friendship often and treasure the memories we made. How are your pre-med studies progressing? Each word was chosen for multiple audiences. Sarah would read it as a normal update from a friend pursuing graduate education, while the monitoring systems would catalog it as another successful maintenance of her cover identity. Maya had learned to live in multiple layers of reality simultaneously, a skill that was both essential for her work and psychologically exhausting. Director, Morrison's voice crackled through the intercom again. Priority 1. We have a situation developing that requires your immediate attention. Conference Room Alpha, highest classification level. Maya saved her work and made her way through corridors that looked like any modern office building, but housed some of the most sensitive intelligence operations in the world. Conference Room Alpha was reserved for briefings that could reshape international relations, and Maya's presence there indicated how much her analytical abilities had come to be valued by the intelligence community. Agent Pierce was waiting for her, along with 3 other officials Maya recognized as senior decision-makers in various intelligence agencies. The atmosphere in the room was tense with the focused energy that accompanied breaking developments. Priority 1, Pierce said, her tone formal but carrying an undertone of personal concern. We've identified the organization that was conducting unauthorized surveillance of students like yourself. They're not government, they're not foreign intelligence, and they're not traditional criminal enterprise. Maya settled into her chair, her mind already shifting into analytical mode. What are they? They appear to be a private intelligence consortium, said a man Maya knew only as Deputy Director Harrison, composed of former government operatives, defense contractors, and technology corporations. They've been identifying and recruiting students with exceptional analytical abilities, apparently building a parallel intelligence capability outside traditional government oversight. Maya felt a chill of recognition. The private sector representative. I met at the coffee shop. He wasn't working for a consulting firm, was he? We believe he was a front man for something much more sophisticated, Pierce confirmed. They've been running what amounts to a talent acquisition program, identifying young analysts before government agencies can recruit them, then offering them positions in a private intelligence network that operates without constitutional limitations. Harrison leaned forward, his expression grim. Maya, your choice to work with us rather than accepting their offer may have saved you from something much darker than we initially understood. We're discovering that students who joined their program haven't been seen by their families or former friends for months. Maya's grandmother's pendant felt heavy against her chest as she processed the implications. You're saying I was being recruited by people who make their analysts disappear? We're saying that your analytical abilities made you valuable enough that someone was willing to risk operating outside legal boundaries to acquire them, Pierce said. The question now is whether you're willing to help us understand and counter their operations. Maya looked around the room at the faces of people who had become her colleagues, mentors, and in Pierce's case, something approaching a friend. The moral complexities of intelligence work had proven more nuanced than her academic studies had suggested, but these people were at least operating within democratic oversight systems, bound by laws and constitutional principles that provided some protection against abuse. What do you need me to do? Harrison activated a wall display showing a complex network diagram. We need you to analyze their recruitment patterns, their operational structure, their technological capabilities. Your insights helped us identify this threat. Now we need you to help us neutralize it. Maya studied the data visualization, her mind automatically beginning to identify patterns and connections. They've been targeting students at 12 universities, focusing on individuals with specific combinations of analytical ability, technical skills, and psychological profiles. The selection criteria are incredibly sophisticated. They're not just looking for intelligence. They're looking for people who can think outside established frameworks. Exactly the kind of thinking that made you valuable to us, Pierce noted. But also the kind of thinking that makes someone dangerous to established power structures, Maya realized. If you want to build a private intelligence network that operates outside government oversight, you need analysts who won't be limited by traditional institutional thinking. Maya spent the next 6 hours immersed in analysis that felt both familiar and deeply personal. She was studying a recruitment program that had targeted her, analyzing the methods used to identify and approach students like herself, mapping the network of operatives who had been conducting surveillance on university campuses across the country. The work was intellectually fascinating and personally disturbing. Maya discovered that her own recruitment by the government had been part of a broader competition for analytical talent, a shadow war between official intelligence agencies and private interests who wanted to control the next generation of strategic thinkers. They've recruited at least 47 students over the past 18 months, Maya reported to the assembled officials. The students who joined their program have been isolated from their previous lives, given new identities, and assigned to projects that we can't track through normal channels. It's like they're building a shadow intelligence community. Harrison nodded grimly. Maya, your analysis confirms our worst suspicions. We're dealing with people who are essentially creating a private CIA, accountable to no one, operating with resources we can only guess at. Maya felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders like a familiar burden. Her grandmother had taught her that great abilities came with great obligations, and Maya was beginning to understand the full implications of possessing skills that multiple organizations considered strategic assets. What happens to the students? They've already recruited? Maya asked. Pierce's expression was troubled. We don't know. Our attempts to locate them have been unsuccessful, which suggests they're being held in facilities with sophisticated security measures. Maya, you may be our best hope of understanding their operational methods well enough to find and rescue those students. Maya looked at the network diagram again, seeing not just data points but individual lives that had been swept away by forces beyond their control. Somewhere in that web of connections were young people who had been as naive as she'd been 3 months ago. Students who had made different choices and disappeared into a world where their analytical abilities made them too valuable to be allowed. Freedom. I'll do whatever you need me to do, Maya said, her voice carrying the quiet determination that had become her trademark. But I want to expand my clearance level, access to more operational details, and direct involvement in the rescue planning. If I'm going to help save these people, I need to understand everything we're dealing with." Harrison and Pierce exchanged a look that Maya had learned to recognize as senior officials weighing security protocols against operational necessity. Finally, Harrison nodded. "Priority 1. You're being upgraded to top secret SCI clearance with need-to-know access to compartmented operations. Welcome to the senior analytical team." Maya felt something shift inside her, a final transition from the student she'd been to the intelligence professional she was becoming. The girl who had written essays about surveillance theory was gone, replaced by someone who helped design and implement the systems she'd once studied from the outside. That evening, Maya sat in her small apartment in Arlington, government-provided housing that looked normal but was equipped with security systems that would have impressed her academic imagination and called her parents. The conversations were carefully monitored and limited in scope, but they provided her with emotional connection to the person she'd been before her life became classified. "Zhao Bao," her mother's voice carried across the secure connection. "You sound different every time we talk. More serious, more distant. Are you happy in your new studies?" Maya touched her grandmother's pendant, drawing strength from the tangible connection to her family's history. "I'm doing work that matters, Mama. Work that helps protect people, even if they never know it's being done. Nai would understand." "Your grandmother always said that service was its own reward," her mother agreed. "But she also said that service without connection to family and community could consume a person's soul. Don't forget who you are, Maya. Don't lose yourself in whatever world you've entered." After hanging up, Maya sat in her secure apartment, surrounded by the technological infrastructure of modern intelligence work, and tried to remember the girl who had sat in university libraries writing essays about digital privacy. That person felt like someone she'd known in a previous life, innocent in ways that were both precious and irretrievably lost. Maya opened her laptop, a device far more sophisticated than anything she'd possessed as a student, and began working on a personal project she'd been developing in her spare time. Using her expanded access and analytical skills, she was building a comprehensive map of private intelligence networks, not just the organization that had tried to recruit her, but the entire ecosystem of private contractors, technology companies, and former government operatives who operated in the spaces between official acknowledgement and public awareness. The work was dangerous, potentially career-ending if discovered by her superiors, but Maya had decided that understanding the full scope of private intelligence operations was essential for protecting democratic institutions. Her grandmother had taught her that sometimes individual conscience had to override institutional loyalty, and Maya was beginning to understand what that meant in practice. As she worked, Maya reflected on the path that had brought her from university library to classified conference rooms. Her academic essay about surveillance state theory had been more prophetic than she'd realized. She was now living inside the systems she'd analyzed, helping to shape them while trying to maintain her ethical compass in a world where moral clarity was rare and individual choice carried consequences. She was still learning to calculate. The lotus pendant caught the light from her laptop screen, reminding Maya of her grandmother's wisdom about finding beauty in dark places. Maya Chen, asset priority 1, was learning to bloom in the shadowy waters of intelligence work while maintaining her connection to the values that had shaped her before her life became a matter of national security. 2 years later, Maya stood before a secure video conference display in the Situation Room, briefing the President and National Security Council on Operation Lotus Shield, the mission that had rescued 31 students from private intelligence compounds across 3 countries. Her analysis had been instrumental in locating and freeing young analysts who had been recruited, isolated, and exploited by organizations operating beyond legal oversight. Asset priority 1, the President said, using the designation that had become Maya's professional identity. "Your work has prevented the creation of a shadow intelligence network that could have Destabilize democratic institutions worldwide. The grateful nation recognizes your service. Maya nodded professionally, though privately she reflected on the cost of that service. The girl who had worried about essay deadlines was gone, replaced by someone who carried state secrets and operated in spaces where personal relationships were potential security vulnerabilities. Her success had transformed her into exactly the kind of analytical weapon that multiple organizations had competed to acquire. Director Morrison activated a new display showing global intelligence networks. Priority 1, we're authorizing you to lead the Cognitive Security Task Force, a new unit focused on protecting analytical talent from unauthorized recruitment and exploitation. You'll have resources and authority to operate internationally. Mayo studied the organizational chart that would make her responsible for identifying and protecting young analysts around the world, people like she'd been 2 years ago. The irony wasn't lost on her. She'd become part of the recruitment system she'd once studied from the outside, though now she was working to protect students rather than exploit them. 5 years later, Dr. Maya Chen, her academic credentials had been retroactively enhanced through a carefully managed doctoral program sat in her office at Georgetown University's new Center for Ethical Intelligence Studies. The center, funded through discrete government grants, provided her with perfect cover for continuing her intelligence work while returning to the academic environment that had shaped her original thinking. Sarah Kim, now Dr. Sarah Kim, had completed her residency in pediatric medicine and taken a position at Children's Hospital. She sat across from Maya in the university office, the same concerned expression on her face that Maya remembered from their dormitory conversations years earlier. "You know, I always suspected you weren't really in a normal graduate program," Sarah said, her voice carrying the gentle humor that had made their friendship so precious. "No graduate program makes someone disappear for months at a time, then return speaking 3 new languages and flinching every time someone approaches from behind." Maya smiled, the first genuine expression of joy she'd managed in weeks. "I'm sorry I couldn't tell you the truth, Sarah. There were security considerations, legal constraints, people's safety involved." "I understand," Sarah said, though her tone suggested the wounds of deception hadn't fully healed. "But Maya, I need to ask you something directly. Are you happy? Are you the person you wanted to become when we used to talk about our dreams in that little dorm room?" Maya considered the question, weighing it against 5 years of classified experiences, missions that had saved lives and prevented international incidents, work that had protected democratic institutions from threats the public would never know existed. She'd become one of the most effective intelligence analysts of her generation, respected by colleagues who knew her only by designation, trusted with secrets that could reshape geopolitical relationships. "I'm serving something larger than myself," Maya said finally. "I'm using my abilities to protect people, to prevent conflicts, to maintain the stability that allows others to live normal lives. That has meaning, even when it comes with personal costs." Sarah nodded, but her expression remained troubled. "Maya, I've watched you transform from someone who questioned authority into someone who embodies it. That's not necessarily wrong, but it's different from the person I knew who wanted to expose surveillance overreach and protect individual privacy rights." Maya touched her grandmother's pendant, now worn smooth by years of nervous handling during classified briefings and covert operations. "Sarah, the world is more complex than our dorm room discussions could have imagined. Sometimes protecting privacy rights requires understanding surveillance systems. Sometimes preventing authoritarianism requires working within institutional power structures. And sometimes," Sarah said gently, "people convince themselves that compromising their principles serves a greater good, when really it just serves institutional interests that have learned to co-opt idealistic young people." Maya felt the words like a physical blow, recognizing in them the critical thinking she'd once applied to government systems, now being applied to her own choices. Sarah, you don't understand the threats we face, the complexity of the decisions that have to be made with incomplete information under impossible time pressures. Maybe not, Sarah agreed. But I understand what it looks like when someone I care about disappears into a system that gradually transforms them into someone they wouldn't have recognized 5 years ago. 10 years later, Maya stood at the podium of the Senate Intelligence Committee, 31 years old, but feeling decades older, preparing to testify about Operation Cognitive Shield, a program she designed to identify and protect young analysts from exploitation by private intelligence networks. The operation had been successful beyond her projections, but it had also raised uncomfortable questions about the ethics of government recruitment of student talent. Dr. Chen, said Senator Patricia Williams, your program has been remarkably effective at preventing unauthorized recruitment of analytical talent. However, some critics argue that you've simply created a more sophisticated version of the same practice you were originally protecting students from. How do you respond to that characterization? Maya looked out at the hearing room, filled with reporters, congressional staff, and interested observers who represented the democratic oversight system she'd sworn to serve. Senator Williams, the fundamental difference is consent and transparency. Students recruited through official channels understand what they're agreeing to, maintain connections to their families and communities, and operate within constitutional and legal frameworks. The private networks we've disrupted offered no such protections. Preparing and narrating this type of story took us long efforts and hard work. So if you are enjoying the story, please consider subscribing to our channel. Senator Williams leaned forward, her expression skeptical. Dr. Chen, you were recruited as an undergraduate through methods that some might consider manipulative, mysterious messages, implied threats to your family's safety, pressure to make immediate decisions. How is that substantially different from the private recruitment methods you've worked to eliminate? Maya felt the weight of the question, recognizing in it the same analytical thinking she'd once applied to surveillance systems, now being directed at her own recruitment experience. Senator, you raise valid concerns about the methods used in my case. I've worked within the system to develop more ethical recruitment protocols that prioritize genuine informed consent over crisis-driven decision-making. But Dr. Chen, another senator interjected, aren't you essentially the product of the system you're now claiming to reform? How can we trust your assessment of ethical recruitment when you yourself might be the result of unethical practices? Maya touched her pendant, drawing strength from her grandmother's memory, and made a decision that she knew would reshape the remainder of her career. Senators, you're absolutely right to question the ethics of my recruitment and the development of my career within intelligence systems. I've spent 10 years serving what I believed were democratic interests, but I've also spent 10 years gradually losing connection to the civilian perspectives that originally motivated my work. The hearing room grew quiet as Maya continued, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had decided to speak truth regardless of personal consequences. I propose the creation of an independent oversight board, staffed by civilians with no intelligence community connections, to review recruitment practices and ensure that young people with analytical abilities are protected from exploitation by both government and private interests. 15 years later, Maya sat in her small apartment in Portland, Oregon, no longer Dr. Chen of Georgetown University or Asset Priority, one of classified operations, but simply Maya Chen, freelance researcher and consultant for digital rights organizations. The transition from intelligence analyst to civilian advocate had been difficult, marked by years of debriefing, psychological evaluation, and careful management of the classified information that would always be part of her memory. Dr. Elena Vasquez, now in her 50s and leading the Digital Rights Foundation that had tried to recruit Maya in that coffee shop 15 years earlier, sat across from her at Maya's simple kitchen table. Maya, I have to admit, I didn't think you'd ever find your way back to the values that originally motivated your research. The intelligence community has a way of permanently transforming people. Maya poured tea from the same electric kettle she'd used in her dorm room, a small connection to the person she'd been before her life became classified. Elena, I never lost those values, but I did lose sight of them for a while. It took me years to understand that serving democratic institutions sometimes requires being willing to criticize them, even when criticism comes with personal costs. Elena studied Maya with the same intensity she'd shown in the coffee shop years earlier. The work you're doing now, documenting recruitment practices, advocating for student protections, exposing the connections between government and private intelligence networks, it's exactly what we hoped you'd do 15 years ago. Do you ever wonder how different your life would have been if you'd chosen to work with us initially? Maya touched her pendant, now bearing the patina of decades of wear, and considered the question. I think I needed to understand the systems from the inside before I could effectively advocate for protecting people from them. My intelligence. Experience gave me knowledge and credibility that I couldn't have gained any other way. But it also cost you 15 years of normal life, Elena pointed out. Relationships, experiences, the kind of personal development that doesn't happen when you're carrying state secrets and operating under assumed identities. Maya looked around her small apartment, furnished with the accumulated possessions of someone who had learned to value simplicity over security, genuine connection over operational efficiency. Her life was quieter now, less dramatic than her years in intelligence, but also more authentic to the values her grandmother had taught her. Elena, I'm trying to develop a model for ethical intelligence work that protects both national security and individual rights. It's possible to have effective intelligence capabilities without exploiting young people or operating outside democratic oversight. But it requires people who are willing to work within the system to change it. Elena nodded, though her expression remained somewhat skeptical. Maya, you're doing important work now, but I worry about the cost. You gave the government the most productive years of your analytical career, and now you're trying to reform systems that benefited from your contributions. There's something tragic about that. Maya considered Elena's words, weighing them against her memories of operations that had prevented attacks, rescued exploited analysts, and protected democratic institutions from private interests that operated without accountability. I think my grandmother would say that service is its own reward, even when it comes with personal sacrifice. But she'd also say that true service requires eventually speaking truth to power, even when that power is something you've helped create. Years later, Maya stood before a congressional hearing room once again. Now 41 years old and recognized as the leading expert on ethical intelligence recruitment and civilian protection from analytical exploitation. The Chen protocol, developed from her recommendations, had been adopted by democratic governments worldwide as the standard for protecting student privacy and preventing unauthorized recruitment of analytical talent. Sarah Kim sat in the gallery, now chief of pediatrics at Children's Hospital and one of Maya's closest friends despite the years of necessary secrecy. She'd married, had children, built the kind of normal life that Maya had sacrificed for service, but she'd never stopped believing in their friendship or supporting Maya's eventual return to civilian advocacy. Dr. Chen, said the current chairwoman of the Senate Intelligence Committee, your work over the past decade has fundamentally reshaped how democratic governments approach recruitment and protection of analytical talent. What do you see as the most important challenges facing the next generation of young people with exceptional abilities? Maya looked out at the hearing room, noting the presence of university students who were attending as part of a civic engagement program she'd helped develop. Senator, the most important challenge is maintaining the balance between protecting these young people from exploitation and ensuring that democratic governments have access to the analytical abilities needed to address complex global threats. We need systems that are transparent, ethical, and respectful of individual choice. Dr. Chen, you've spoken previously about the personal costs of intelligence service. What advice would you give to young people who are considering careers in analytical fields that might attract government or private sector recruitment? Maya touched her pendant, now supplemented by a small lotus flower pin that had become her trademark at public appearances. I would tell them to understand that exceptional abilities come with exceptional responsibilities, but that those responsibilities should never require sacrificing their fundamental values or losing connection to the civilian communities they serve. Intelligence work should enhance human capabilities, not diminish human dignity. After the hearing, Maya walked through the streets of Washington, D.C., past the coffee shops and university buildings where her transformation had begun 2 decades earlier. The city looked different now, shaped by security measures that she'd helped design and implement during her intelligence career, protected by systems that operated invisibly to maintain the normal life that civilians took for granted. 25 years later, Maya sat in her grandmother's garden in San Francisco, now tended by her own hands as she'd inherited the family home after her parents' passing. The lotus flowers bloomed with the same resilience her grandmother had taught her to admire, their roots deep in rich mud, but their faces turned always toward the sun. At 46, Maya had become the director of the International Institute for Ethical Intelligence, an organization that provided oversight and advocacy for young people with exceptional analytical abilities worldwide. The Institute's work had prevented the creation of multiple private intelligence networks while ensuring that democratic governments maintained access to the analytical capabilities needed to address global challenges. A young woman, perhaps 21, sat across from Maya on the garden bench. Her name was Jennifer Liu, a political science student at Berkeley whose research into AI governance had attracted attention from multiple organizations. Jennifer's situation was remarkably similar to Maya's own recruitment experience, but now there were protocols, legal protections, and advocacy organizations to ensure that her choices would be made with full information and genuine consent. Dr. Chen, Jennifer said, her voice carrying the same intellectual curiosity that Maya remembered from her own undergraduate years. How did you know you were making the right choice when you decided to work with the government instead of the digital rights organizations? Maya watched a lotus flower turning toward the afternoon sun, its petals perfectly formed, despite having emerged from dark water and rich mud. Jennifer, I don't know that I made the right choice. I made the choice that seemed necessary at the time, with the information I had and under the pressures I was facing. What I learned over the following decades is that service is an ongoing decision, not a single moment of commitment. Jennifer nodded, though Maya could see the same uncertainty in her eyes that Maya had felt in that coffee shop 25 years earlier. The different organizations all say they want to protect people, but they want me to use my abilities in very different ways. How do you evaluate competing claims about serving the greater good? Maya smiled, recognizing the question as one her grandmother might have asked during her own period of difficult choices. Jennifer, my grandmother used to say that the lotus teaches us about transformation, how something beautiful can emerge from challenging circumstances without losing its essential nature. Whatever organization you choose to work with, the important thing is maintaining your connection to the values that motivated your original research. But Dr. Chen, your choices changed who you are. You went from student to intelligence analyst to civilian advocate. How do I know the person making the choice now is the same person who will live with its consequences? Maya touched her pendant, feeling the weight of decades of decisions and their accumulated consequences. Jennifer, you don't. Change is inevitable, but you can influence the direction of that change by staying connected to the communities and values that matter to you. I lost sight of that for a while, but I found my way back. Maya handed Jennifer a business card for the International Institute for Ethical Intelligence. Whatever you decide, Jennifer, remember that you have advocates, legal protections, and resources that didn't exist when I was making similar choices. Use them. The world needs people who can see patterns that others miss, but it needs those people to remain connected to their humanity. As Jennifer left, Maya sat alone in her grandmother's garden, surrounded by lotus flowers that embodied the wisdom Nai had tried to teach her decades earlier. Maya Chen had become many things over the course of her life: student, analyst, operative, advocate, but she'd learned that the most important transformation was learning to bloom in whatever circumstances she found herself while maintaining her essential nature. The sun was setting over San Francisco Bay, casting golden light across the lotus pond her grandmother had tended for decades. Maya touched her pendant one final time and whispered a prayer of gratitude for the difficult path that had brought her back to this garden, to this moment of quiet reflection on the choices that had shaped a life devoted to protecting others from the kinds of exploitation she'd experienced and transcended. Tomorrow there would be more young people to advise, more organizations to monitor, more work to be done ensuring that exceptional analytical abilities serve democratic values rather than undermining them. But tonight, Maya Chen sat in her grandmother's garden and celebrated the resilience that allowed lotus flowers to bloom beautifully in the darkest waters, their faces always turned toward the light. 30 years later, Maya Chen, now 51 and recognized internationally as the architect of ethical intelligence frameworks that protected analytical talent while maintaining democratic security capabilities, stood before the United Nations General Assembly. The Chen protocols had been adopted by 43 nations, creating the first international standards for protecting young people with exceptional abilities from exploitation by government and private interests. Distinguished delegates, Maya said, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had spent 3 decades transforming personal experience into institutional change. We gather today to address the fundamental question of how democratic societies can access the analytical capabilities needed to address global challenges while protecting the individual rights and dignity of those who possess such capabilities. In the gallery, an elderly woman watched with pride and concern. Dr. Sarah Kim, now in her 70s and recently retired from a distinguished medical career, had remained Maya's closest friend throughout the decades of transformation, secrecy, and eventual advocacy that had defined Maya's adult life. The young people we seek to protect, Maya continued, are not resources to be exploited or weapons to be acquired. They are citizens whose exceptional abilities come with exceptional responsibilities, but those responsibilities must be balanced with exceptional protections. Maya's speech outlined the comprehensive international framework she'd spent a decade developing: legal protections for analytical talent, oversight mechanisms for recruitment practices, advocacy resources for young people facing difficult choices, and accountability measures for organizations that sought to employ exceptional abilities in service of various interests. After her address, Maya met with Sarah in a small cafe near the United Nations building. At 73, Sarah remained sharp and engaged, her medical career having taught her the same lessons about service and sacrifice that Maya had learned through intelligence work. "Maya," Sarah said, her voice carrying the affection of 5 decades of friendship, "I'm proud of what you've accomplished, but I sometimes wonder if you ever regret the path you took. You've spent your entire adult life dealing with the consequences of decisions you made at 21. Maya sipped her tea-still green tea with honey, the same preference she'd maintained since her undergraduate days, and considered Sarah's question. "I think about the alternative path sometimes. The life I might have lived if I'd chosen differently, the relationships I might have maintained, the kind of normal experiences I gave up for classified work. Do you regret it?" Maya looked out the window at the bustling New York street, filled with people living ordinary lives protected by security measures they would never see or understand. "I regret some of the costs, especially the years when I lost sight of the values that originally motivated me. But Sarah, the work mattered. The threats were real, the people we protected were real, The systems we built to prevent exploitation are protecting young people right now. Sarah nodded, though her expression remained thoughtful. Maya, you've become something I'm not sure that 21-year-old in the dorm room would recognize. That's not necessarily bad, but it is ... complete. You've been transformed by the systems you initially wanted to study and reform. Maybe that's what service actually means, Maya said. Being willing to be changed by the work you do, while trying to ensure that the change serves something larger than yourself. 40 years after the coffee shop, Maya Chen, 61 years old and preparing for retirement from activacy, sat in the same coffee shop where Agent Pierce had first approached her 4 decades earlier. The grind had been renovated several times over the intervening decades, but it remained a gathering place for university students, and Maya often came here to observe the next generation of young people who might face choices similar to her. Own, a young man, perhaps 20, sat at a nearby table working on a laptop. His screen displayed the kind of complex analytical work that Maya recognized as potentially attracting attention from various interested parties. She watched him with the protective instincts of someone who had devoted her life to ensuring that exceptional abilities didn't become weapons for exploitation. Maya's phone buzzed with a message from the current director of the International Institute for Ethical Intelligence, Dr. Chen. We've identified a student at Stanford whose research profile matches the patterns that typically attract unauthorized recruitment attention. Would you be available to provide consultation? Maya smiled, recognizing the irony of receiving recruitment-related messages in the same location where her own recruitment had begun. But now there were protocols, legal protections, advocacy resources, and oversight mechanisms to ensure that whatever choices young analysts made would be informed and voluntary rather than coerced and secretive. She walked over to the young man's table, noting his focused attention to what appeared to be research into quantum encryption methods, exactly the kind of work that would interest both government agencies and private intelligence networks. "Excuse me," Maya said gently, "I couldn't help noticing your research. I'm Dr. Maya Chen from the International Institute for Ethical Intelligence. Could I have a moment of your time?" The young man looked up, his expression mixing curiosity with caution. "Dr. Chen, I've read your work on analytical talent protection. Are you here because of my research?" Maya sat down across from him, remembering her own confusion and fear when Agent Pierce had first approached her in this same location. "I'm here because people with your analytical abilities sometimes attract attention from organizations that aren't always transparent about their intentions or methods. I want to make sure you understand your rights and options before anyone approaches you with offers that might seem exciting but come with hidden costs." The young man, David Park, according to the university ID visible on his backpack, nodded seriously. "I've been getting some strange emails lately. People claiming to represent various government agencies and private consulting firms, all interested in discussing my research. It's been making me nervous." Maya felt a familiar surge of protective concern for young people whose intellectual gifts made them targets for recruitment by organizations that might not prioritize their well-being. "David, you have legal rights, advocacy resources, and support systems that didn't exist when I was your age. Whatever choices you make about your future, make sure they're informed choices based on complete information about what you're agreeing to." She handed David a card for the International Institute, along with contact information for legal advocacy resources specifically designed to protect analytical talent. "David, exceptional abilities come with exceptional opportunities, but they also come with exceptional risks. Use the protections that are available to you." Maya left David with information packets about his rights and walked back to her apartment, reflecting on the circular nature of her life's work. She'd begun as a student whose research attracted unwanted attention, been recruited into systems she'd initially wanted to reform, gradually lost sight of her original values, and eventually found her way back to advocacy work that protected others from experiencing similar exploitation. 45 years later, Maya Chen, now 66 and fully retired from formal advocacy work, tended the lotus garden she'd inherited from her grandmother and expanded over decades of careful cultivation. The flowers bloomed with the same resilience that had inspired Nai's wisdom, their beauty emerging from rich mud and dark water through a process of transformation that never failed to amaze Maya. A documentary filmmaker had requested an interview about her life and work, and Maya had agreed to share her story as part of an educational project designed to help young people understand the choices they might face if their analytical abilities attracted attention from various organizations. Dr. Chen, the filmmaker, said, adjusting her camera equipment in Maya's peaceful garden, "You've lived through a remarkable transformation from student to intelligence analyst to civilian advocate. What would you tell your 21-year-old self if you could send a message back through time?" Maya touched her grandmother's pendant, now worn smooth by 5 decades of handling during moments of stress, decision, and reflection. "I would tell her that the choices she's about to make will shape her entire life, but that no single decision has to define her permanently. I would tell her to stay connected to the values and relationships that matter most, even when institutional pressures make that difficult. You regret the path you took." Maya looked around her garden, filled with lotus flowers that embodied the wisdom her grandmother had tried to teach her about finding beauty and strength in challenging circumstances. "I regret some of the costs, especially the years when I lost sight of who I wanted to be, but I don't regret the work itself. The threats were real, the people we protected were real, and the systems we built to prevent exploitation are still protecting young people today. What do you see as your most important legacy?" Maya considered the question, weighing it against decades of classified work that would never be publicly acknowledged, advocacy efforts that had gradually reshaped institutional practices, and the countless individual conversations with young people who had been helped by the resources and protections she'd worked to create. "I hope my legacy is the understanding that exceptional abilities should enhance human dignity rather than diminish it. That service to democratic values sometimes requires criticizing democratic institutions, and that it's possible to work within systems while maintaining the values that originally motivated you to seek change." The filmmaker packed up her equipment, leaving Maya alone in her garden as the sun set over San Francisco Bay. Maya sat on the bench her grandmother had built decades earlier, surrounded by lotus flowers that would bloom again tomorrow there. Faces turned always toward the light. At 66, Maya Chen had lived a life shaped by a single conversation in a coffee shop, a moment when her academic curiosity had attracted the attention of people who transformed students into assets. The path that followed had been complex, morally ambiguous, personally costly, and ultimately meaningful in ways she was still discovering. Maya touched her pendant one final time and whispered a prayer of gratitude for the difficult journey that had taught her the difference between service and exploitation, between necessary secrecy and harmful deception, between using exceptional abilities to protect democracy and allowing those abilities to be used in ways that undermined democratic values. Tomorrow, there would be more lotus flowers blooming in the garden, more young people facing difficult choices, more work to be done ensuring that analytical gifts served human flourishing rather than institutional power. But tonight, Maya Chen sat in the garden her grandmother had tended, celebrating the resilience that allowed beauty to emerge from darkness and wisdom to develop through experience, even when that experience was more complex than any textbook could capture. The final light of day reflected off the lotus pond, creating patterns that reminded Maya of the data visualizations she'd spent decades analyzing. But unlike those digital patterns that revealed hidden threats and complex systems, the natural patterns in her grandmother's garden spoke of cyclical renewal, of beauty that emerged from difficult circumstances, of wisdom that developed slowly, but endured through generations of challenge and change. Maya Chen, Asset Priority 1, Student, Analyst, Advocate. and guardian of lotus flowers, had learned to bloom in the muddy waters of intelligence work while maintaining her essential nature. Her face turned always toward the light of the values her grandmother had taught her to cherish. The girl who had written essays about surveillance theory had become someone who helped protect others from surveillance exploitation. And in that transformation, she had found a kind of peace that no classification level could contain or threaten.